Welcome back to Bad Attitude C10. If y'all remember, several months ago, I decided to remove the plastic style lid off of the 20-gallon fuel cell for the Bad Attitude C10 and replaced it with an aluminum style filler neck. Along the way, we kind of ran across a hiccup on the cell when we checked the sending unit that was supposed to be a 90 ohm sending unit. So while it did register 90 ohms as stated, the lowest setting was actually at 9.1 or 2, and the highest would go up to 100, which meant when we tested it with the gauge in the console or on the dash of this Bad Attitude C10, it would read full, and then at the lowest setting, it would read that it still had 1/8 of a tank to 1/4 of a tank, which was not going to do us any good. So at the time, I was strapped for cash, and I was kind of like, oh, well, I'm just going to have to remember this, and maybe I can fix this later. Well, I then ran across a video that another YouTuber had put out where he was getting his fuel system contaminated with some black residue, and it ended up coming from the float mechanism, or the float on the level mechanism for one of the eBay / Amazon style fuel cells, which is exactly what we had. And then I'm like, man, I really don't want that happening, because if it's breaking down because of the E85 like he said, we're going to be running E85 too. So I opted to save the money up and go ahead and buy the replacement level sensor or sending unit that you see on the screen at this time. So let's get started. I kind of had a sense of deja vu at first, but you know, guys, in the long run, this is going to be the best thing anyway, because I hate half-assing stuff, and being on a strict budget has driven me batty in this whole build. So doing this in the long run is going to be beneficial, period. So I'm going to go ahead and time-lapse all this, and we're going to start by removing all the hardware for the filler neck that we had just previously installed. Now, with the hardware removed, I had a little issue trying to get the filler neck off, and it turned out what it was, the little nylon but the nylon washers that are for sealing it, they actually all split and were countersunk into the holes of the filler neck. So once that was removed, I was able to get the sealing ring out of the backside, and I moved on to the 2 Phillips headed bolts, or screws should I say, that held in the sending unit that came with our cell from the factory. Now guys, just in case y'all didn't watch the first video, again, you're going to put your meter on the ohms setting. And then you're just going to hook your leads up to the 2 wires coming off the sending unit. And when it's all the way down, it should be at 0 if it's 0 to 90. In our case, it started at 9.1 to 9.2, and it would go up to 99 something, sometimes 100. So it was a 90 ohm sending unit, but it was off. So up next, we went on ahead and dug out our new vertical style level sensor, which is pretty cool, heavy duty and stainless steel, and the float is supposed to be E85 friendly. So we're going to go ahead and hook our leads up to the ohm meter again, and with it hooked up, we're going to stand it up vertical and see what this meter says. So here we go, and with it vertical and seated, it is at 0.4. So it is below anything in 0, so it shouldn't make our fuel level gauge go to 0 in our dash, or empty. And now at full, it shows to be 91.9, which our gauge that's in our dash panel is a 0 to 90. So this thing should solve our problem. So we're killing 2 birds with, 1 stone, I guess you can say. Now, as far as the lock ring went, when I installed the bolts to the bottom of this to where I'd be able to, put it in the cell and then mount the other stuff from the top, I didn't count the bolt holes properly, so they were kind of bugging me. And I'm not OCD or anything that I know of. I guess maybe I am. But they were spaced out every 3rd one, and they should have been spaced out every 2nd, because the last 2 were close together. And when I put the cell together, I had 2 that were side by side, and the other ones are staggered. And I mean, it bugged me. So like I said, I'm not anal usually, but I guess in a way I am. So I'm going to go ahead and correct that now, because I don't want to see it again. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall these bolts and snug them up and get ready to put our filler neck, on in the future. Now guys, this next part probably really isn't needed, but what I did is I got a piece of flat aluminum and I went ahead and marked it with the backing plate for the original sending unit, and I marked the two holes that are already drilled in the cell, and then I split the difference and marked a center hole. And I'm going to pre-drill these and use this as a backing plate for the guide of the hole saw. So here we go. With the hose now drilled, I installed the backing plate into the fuel cell. Now guys, to elaborate on this, I'm using the center hole for the guide bit on the hose saw to hopefully keep it from, chattering and bouncing around and keeping my hose centered in the cell. Now drilled, I'm going to remove the backing plate and move on to the next step, which will be basically using a half round file to remove the burrs or edges that are on the cell itself. Now it's going to sound kind of like a stall because I only use pressure in one direction. Now I used a blue shop rag first to wipe this and make sure there was no, slithers or splinters that go in my finger, and then I double checked with my finger. Now I'm going to go ahead and use the gasket for the new sending unit, and I'm going to mark the hole next to it with the spring-loaded center punch. With the hole marked, I'll go ahead and use a bit and drill a pilot hole. The hole will then be drilled to the proper size. Now, using the sending unit as a template, I will mark the remaining hose using a spring-loaded center punch. Well, shit, guess what? The camera turned off. So, let me catch you up. So after drilling the hose, I started installing the hardware to hold on the sending unit, and I used the rubber sealing gasket to hold the hardware in place. So I'm going to go ahead and put this last one in since I now know the camera's off, and I'm going to take a measurement to show you the depth. Well, hold on, let me do it from the right side. As you can see here, our tank floor to the lower portion is 9 3/4 inches. They recommend that the sending unit be at least a ½ inch from the floor. So I ordered a 9-inch sending unit because the next step up would have been a 10. So we're going to go ahead and install the sending unit and put the nylock nuts on it to hold it into place. Now I'm sure by now some of y'all noticed that this thing is crooked. I used one of the regular mounting hose for the original sending unit, and it made the hose gonna kind of be staggered offset just a hair, so I can live with this because instead of drilling 5 new hose, I utilized a hole that was already there, so that's fine with me. But shortcutting it and not having it on straight from the get-go or put it on this crooked, if I would have drilled the original hose, I then would have been a little anal and upset about it because I would have been like, hey, you need to pay attention, knucklehead. Up next, I wiped the cell out and vacuumed it. So I figured I'd throw a light in the cell and then get the camera and show y'all what it looks like. So now you can see exactly how far the float's positioned from the floor and the retaining nuts that have the flange on them coming upwards, which will keep it sealed. And then if you look over here, it is cleaned out and everything, and that is the sump right there. So good to go. I figured before I reinstalled the aluminum filler neck, I'd double check the settings on this. So there you go, it's at 0.4. And all the way up at the top is at 91.9, and I'm going to turn the light off just to be sure that one of these is going to come out whenever I show it in the video. Well, hit the hold button. Here we go. So 0.4 and 91.9, same thing again. So we're good to go, guys. So before we put the filler neck on, we had to put our threaded ring on the inside of the cell, and then remember, we need to remember which way to point it. So ours is going to be pointed toward the sump end, so it's going to go that way. So we're going to get it on, and then using nylock nuts on the studs, We're going to go ahead and start those, and then we're going to get the bolts and go through the top. Now originally the bolts were non-collared flange bolts, just a regular bolt with these little nylock washers, and they just kept splitting. So I bought some flange bolts, and I'm going to hopefully the flange is going to seal it better, and we don't have to worry about these nylock washers, you know, coming apart on us in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and time lapse this and get it tightened up. So with our nuts and bolts all tightened up, I'm going to put the cap back on the filler neck and then let y'all see what it looks like. Final, done. And you can see the nylock nuts do have 2 or 3 threads poking through, so they are going to be tightened down, and it looks better than having a whole lot of stud out. So here's the finished product. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time when we finish our cam install. Until then, thanks for watching.